Now tonight on our front, to review the verdict of the University of Ghana's Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research on Ghana's economy. We all know the finance minister presented a review in the context of an IMF program and debt resettling negotiations aimed to address high expectations for economic stability and growth. The review reported 4.7% overall GDP growth rate in Q1 2024, led by a 6.8% growth in the industrial sector. Despite economic improvements as shown by the minister, ISSER insists Afrobarometer surveys indicate persistent hardships due to rising cost of food, transportation, and fuel. Now, ISSER also claims that the external sector showed a trade surplus and improved international reserves. However, ISSER is pointing out that the exchange rate stability remains a concern for SMEs reliant on imports, and perhaps all of us in the Republic of Ghana. On the monetary and financial indicators, ISSER says it showed favorable trends with a significant drop in inflation and a slower depreciation of the cedi, except for the recent mishap. And that fiscal operations also saw upward revisions in total revenue and grants, in a slight downward revision in expenditures. However, the national debt stock increased significantly, driven by continued exchange rate depreciation. ISSER also declared that the industry sector exhibited a significant turnaround with a 6.8% growth in Q1 of this year, highlighting the need for long-term macroeconomic stability. But the agricultural sector, despite government efforts, faced challenges in ensuring food security with ongoing infrastructure projects aimed to improve productivity. The services sector, according to ISSER, remained dominant but showed a slight decline in growth rates compared to the previous year. I am joined tonight by a minister in deputy position at the ministry responsible for finance, Dr. Alex Ampabin, to review some of the recommendations that ISSER is also putting forward. We will sure be joined by the director of ISSER himself, Professor Peter Kote, briefly, to tell us about some of these other recommendations on the notes that are important. The Honorable Deputy Minister, Dr. Alex Ampabin, you are welcome. I hope you are doing well.
I'm very well, thank you.
Now, ISSER paints generally, on the overall, a positive picture. Of course, there are highlighted issues that it brings forth too. I've heard your boss, the finance minister, also say that we are currently fully out of the crisis. Is that something you hold dear and is borne by the facts on the ground?
Thanks very much for having me here this evening. Yes. I've read the ISSER report, and I think they have been very honest in the assessment. Minister talking about where we are yesterday is a true reflection of the reality on the ground. And you need to take this from context, as in where we were, where have we been, and where we are now. If you look at inflation in 2022, you went all the way to 54.1%. Depreciation, the same thing. Almost all the economic indicators, I would say, were going higher back in 2022. In 2023, we moved from 54 to just about 30%, 35, 37%. And to continue that up to 22.8% as of now, I mean, this clearly is not happening by accident, but it's the kind of work that we are putting in. If you look at the growth, for example, we have...
Yeah, but what I hear you saying is that under the same government, we took inflation to 54%. We brought it down. So we have done so well. I mean, it's not self-serving.
No. I think there's something we need to be clear. One, where was Ghana in 2022? 17, 18, 19? The economy was growing on average of 7% per annum. We had...
No, we'll do it, go for it, but I'm talking about inflation.
I'm coming.
Yes,
Please don't pause.
Because you mentioned the inflation part.
You said it's self-defeating, and I want to address that.
No, I'm saying that it's self-serving for you to bring inflation from 54% to around 22%
I think you're missing
now.
the point. No, don't interject me there. Let me.
I get your point fully.
The reason is I tried to take from a context of 2022. But then you interjected me there, saying it's self-defeating. Then I want to take you back to why we got to the 54. Are you getting it? So 2017, 18, 19, the economy was growing 7%. We were on a single-digit inflation. We had a single-digit inflation for 24 months. That has never happened in our history. And that didn't happen by accident. And then you all know what happened in 2020. The aftermath of which led us into the 54. So the 54, nobody carried itself there. But the reality of what hit Ghana took us there. And what I'm saying is that for you to understand where we are now, you have to appreciate, step back, and appreciate where we are coming from. And from 54, we came to 37, now we're on 22.9. This is no way to say that we are doing well. I mean, the economy is brilliant. But I'm glad to say we are doing well. If I say we are doing well, as managers of the economy, from where we are, and from going through the IMF, by the way, no country in the history of fiscal consolidation as the magnitude we have grown by more than 1.5%. But we, of all odds, grew by 2.9% against even the program target of 1.5. We followed that up with a subsequent quarter of 4.7 growth. These are real facts. These are the realities on the ground. And the point I'm trying to make is that this is in no way to suggest that everything is brilliant. But we are on the path to a sustained recovery. That is the fundamental I want to establish.
So when the minister says we are out of the crisis, what does it mean? Of
course. I mean, looking at where we are now as a country, and again, going back to where you were, and from all the indications, especially considering the debt restructuring we have done, and the space we are able to maneuver, I think as a country, we've recorded 2 successive quarterly growth. We have inflation coming down. We have, what do you call it? Depreciation of the currency also coming down. Of course, there has been recent pressures, and I'm not oblivious of this. But if the minister says we are out of what we experienced in 2022, I perfectly agree with that, because we have more than enough in our armory and what we are putting across, and the management from our side, what we are putting in, bearing in mind the IMF program, which of course we have to strictly go by it. That becomes our yardstick, or do I call it as a benchmark in how we operate. Once you sign up to the program, you can't get up and do what you want.
Except that, see, in the year 2017, we were told 15.4 inflation was a serious issue, and we were in deep crisis at the time. And that's what we had ending the year 2016. But we have inflation somewhere around 22%, and that's out of crisis.
Again, I think if you get a context where I started, you wouldn't be repeating this question. Because the issue is, what was the situation in 2015 and 16? Had Ghana or globally in the world, had we encountered such a serious turbulence? No. So what then informed that inflationary rate? And if it wasn't for what happened in the COVID era, which people don't, sometimes people might want to think maybe we keep repeating the issue of COVID.
But over-exaggerate.
It's not over-exaggeration.
Because it has been pointed out to you by both the World Bank and more recently even Kwaku Kwarteng, that managers of the economy like yourself ought to admit, and he's been in that position that you occupy today, that you contributed to where we are today. It was not Joe's external shocks alone that brought us where we are. I mean, I'm hearing the minister now apologizing for things. Is that an admission that those of you in government are able to do?
I think it would have been good if you had quoted what the World Bank said, but of course I'm not going to address that because I didn't put it as a question. Now, minister's apology yesterday, I think is in order, and personally I will reiterate. The reason is that the DDEP, we all know the hardship it brought on Ghanaians, and I don't think as managers of the economy we take that lightly. People had to endure that. People had to go through that. And it was the only option we had at the time to save the country. So people having to sacrifice their monies, if you like to call it, for Ghana, so that the country doesn't sink. And it is the basis of that sacrifices of those generous Ghanaians, that the economy is where it is now. If they had said no, they didn't want to participate, if they did not give us those, their sacrifices, we wouldn't be seeing the stories I'm telling you now. And only God knows where the country will have been. So the minister saying, we apologize, is a way of saying that, yes, we appreciate what you did for us, but we are sorry for putting you through what we went through. But government wholly appreciates it, and we are very, very grateful for that sacrifice those bondholders had to take, the hard decision they had to take in helping us all to save the economy. And to me, there's no better word than to say, as a country, as government, and as a ministry, we appreciate every single Ghanaian that participated in the DDEP.
Except that Dr. Edouard and Co., these picketing bondholders, believe that this is really half-hearted. You have not. They have been pushing for specifics, demands they're making basically every month. They come in to come and picket for one reason or the other. They believe that you're not giving them that listening ear, and yet you're out there apologizing to the generality of the public. But there are people who feel they ought to be listened to and their issues dealt with immediately.
For me, what I know, being in the ministry, is that government and the ministry have been forthcoming with our commitments. We've been honoring all our obligations to the bondholders, and coming August, there's already money earmarked for this month's payment. So,
but you know why they are protesting?
I haven't, no.
You are not aware?
I'm not aware, no.
As in the ministry is not aware, or you as an individual, you are not aware?
If the ministry is aware, being a deputy minister, I should be aware. So, or if I'm aware, then the ministry should be aware. But as far as I know, well, maybe I haven't been there for longer, but the period I've been there for just over 2 months in the role.
In fact, there are issues to do with the erratic nature of payments that they are supposed to raise. In fact, that's the core issue they raise.
But do you have any evidence on outstanding that we haven't paid?
But
because
that's what they're saying.
We are on track.
With respect, Dr. Edouard Anentwi used to head SEC. He's not a straw man who will be out there protesting for protest's sake. I hope you understand my point.
I understand, and I won't question the credibility of a renowned individual. But the point I'm also trying to make is that government is on track. And I will advise, maybe if you wanted to have this conversation, you could get some data to be very sure of the commitment that government have not made. Because where I sit, I know for a fact that government have been forthcoming. And I'm telling you that you have, I can't remember the exact amount, actually even had a minister even raised it yesterday. And the amount for this month's repayment is ready. Government is on track on the bondholders. So I'm really kind of surprised with this. But maybe if you get some more to it, or otherwise I'll be more than happy to have a conversation. But from where I sit, I know we have been very forthcoming. Now,
have you been able, I mean, as government, are you willing to also apologize for your role in bringing us where we are? Not implementing the, what they call it, domestic debt exchange, but in creating the crisis that require domestic debt exchange to fix?
I think there are, the point I was making earlier, and I said if you take that statement carefully, this your question, I think it reminds me of when as a lecturer, when you want to test students if they really understand the question. You kind of ask the same question, but going through different angles.
The question I'm asking you is about whether or not there's an admission on your side, and hence an apology to that effect, that we contributed, and I'm not the one saying this. Indeed, Kwaku Kwati is even insistent that that kind of conduct is required by those of you in power to even start off in the first place.
I haven't listened to the Honorable MP.
Oh, you've not heard him on this matter specifically?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
I haven't. If I have, maybe I could have maybe given a better. But to answer your question,
yes,
I started by saying we had negative trade balances for 2015, 2016. We had an exchange rate of about 15-point-something%. We had inflation again around that figures. Now, for 2017, when this government took over, we started reporting positive trade balances. We started with about 1.6 billion in 2017. We moved on to about 3.1 billion in 2018-19. Now, inflation was moved from over 15% to around 8%, and we maintained a single-digit inflation in that period. Growth moved again to a very higher figure. Now, look at our growth, look at our exchange rate, look at our inflation figure in the period 2017, 18, 19, 20, before 20. Every single economic indicator was pointing to the fact that there was a sound economic management at the time. I'm sure you believe that.
Oh, yes, as was predicted by the IMF in 2016, for example.
So everything was on track. Now, the impact of the COVID-19, even for growth, in 2020, Ghana recorded 0.5%, as again the 7% we were experiencing every year until 2020. In 2020, Kenya, Tanzania, and most of our peers recorded a negative growth.
8.1, 6.5, and 6.1.
So I said average of 7. So
yes.
If I say average, I'm right. Now, Ghana, when we were recording all this, it wasn't by magic. It was by sound economic management that made it happen. And when COVID struck, at that particular year, Ghana recorded 0.5% growth. So that should tell you that something happened. So you move from 8.1, 6, 7, and then 0.5. When we did 0.5, most of our neighbors recorded negative growth. What did that tell you? Now, we moved on to a 5.1% growth in 2021. That was the point Ghana, I would say, we were pretty much recovering from the COVID. And then, boom, Russia and Ukraine came in. And we shouldn't downplay the impact of Russia, Ukraine, and the COVID. When that came in, that was 2021, the aftermath of which led to the 54% we recorded on inflation and depreciation in 2022. So for you to understand the context of where we are now and why I think things are going perfectly, to me, Ghana is heading towards the pre-COVID time. And whilst we appreciate the hardship Ghanaians are going through, let us not be shying away from where we were before, where we came to, and how fast, to me, the economy is recovering. And again, I'll repeat, this is not to say everything is perfect now, because it's people's pocket that people want to feel. And I appreciate that prices of stuff are still not be as cheap as pre-COVID. So this is the reality where we accept that, yes, this is not where we want to be. Absolutely not. But in the scheme of things, looking at 2022, 23, where we are heading towards that 15% target, end of year target, will definitely be achieved, and the 8% plus minus two we have programmed for 2025 will definitely be achieved. I have absolutely no doubt about where we are heading towards. I sit there, I work closely with the minister, I'm involved in every single decision ongoing there, and I'm very confident of where we are going. I have no one single doubt.
Forgive me, give me a second. Let me bring in Professor Peter Korte. He's the director at ISSER. Prof, you're welcome to our front. Of course, it was your institution that reviewed our mid-year budget review. That gave some of these suggestions. The indication of head minister and his deputy has been reiterating that essentially the crisis period is over. Is that something based on your review you can endorse as factual?
Well, good evening to you and to your discerning viewers, and also to the Deputy Minister. We are not totally out of the woods yet, but I must say that comparing with what the situation in 2022, we are much better off now than in those era where exchange rate volatility was so high. Inflation was very, very high. We went to a 50% rate of inflation. So yes, we have seen some significant gains, but we are not totally out of the woods yet. We are negotiating, still concluding with external creditors. We haven't been able to totally pay bondholders. We still owe. Inflation still remains high, about 20 to 23%. Exchange rate depreciation is also still an issue, although slightly better. So,
in fairness, the Deputy Minister believes that we are current when it comes to payment to bondholders, right? I'm right in quoting you on that.
Yeah, I do not have that information, so I cannot comment on that. So okay. I take his word for it. But he's at the helm of affairs, so we are current, but we still owe. That notwithstanding, the debts that have been rescheduled to 2027 would have to pay. So, I mean, as much as, yes, we have seen positive growth rate, which is good, and I commend all those who have worked tirelessly to get us to this point. I think we still should work out, still be celebrating at this time. One point I need to make is I've been listening carefully, keenly to the Deputy Minister. I think the effect of COVID, one cannot downplay that. It's something that we have not experienced before. And many countries went through it, and others are still struggling. Many African countries and even other developing countries where there is uprising and all that. So we're not downplaying the effect of COVID. We are not downplaying the effect of Russia, Ukraine. But we must also admit that we made a mistake, one way or the other. We shouldn't apportion all the blame to Russia, Ukraine, and COVID. I think there were some inherent weaknesses in our system, which if we do not correct, it will come to bite us again. We will be back to the IMF again, because we have structural problems. We continue to export goods in the raw form. We generate revenue that is not sufficient to run the economy, and we continue to borrow to finance this. This has been our style, and this is what Honorable Kweku described as a Ponzi game, you know. But I think we need to address this problem, borrow within sustainable levels. And what brought us here, I think, where I think we would also made a mistake as a country, is, you know, when we are borrowing, we got to a certain threshold. I think that's where we should be careful not to cross. And if you read the IMF assessment of debt sustainability, right from 2014, they kept sounding the signal, the warning that we were behaving or we were on a dangerous road.
And in 2019, we were told that we were high risk of debt distress.
Yes, from 2014 up to 2019, then of course COVID struck. So it's like we were very fragile. The signs were there. So when COVID hit, we were just taking, you know, we were severely sick. But the other point where I would say we made a mistake was that during COVID and just after COVID, we're still spending like there was no problem. Look at the data, you see our capital expenditure still like pre-COVID era. So it tells you that we still, of course, we had an election, and every incumbent would like to win the election, given what resources it's at his disposal. But we need to learn the bitter lessons from this. Going forward, let's have benchmarks. If we have to legislate debt levels, let's do so. If we have to legislate our budget deficit levels or threshold, let's do so. Our fiscal responsibility advisory council can be, we take the word advisory, make them stronger that they can bite. They can really advise government so that we don't go to or get to the threshold, the level we got to that brought us to this situation. But I must say, there's been a lot of hard work to really turn around the economy for us to be at this point. And I hope and believe that we will ride on this and build a sustainable country. We should do things different. Things should be different now, not business as usual. I see funding for SMEs. We shouldn't go as usual, give funds to party faithfuls. We should work with the banks, with development institutions, and make sure that companies or farmers or firms that have the capacity access these funds so we can repay, they can repay, and then we can see the benefits of some of this investment. So I think there's a lot to say, but let me stop here. Thank you.
I will certainly be asking you this question about whether we indeed have signaled to the people of this republic that we are willing to depart from our previous ways. That's a question I'll ask you, but let me get some reaction to what you have said from the deputy minister. First, starting with who is to blame for where we are today. Are you willing now to share the blame?
I think that the conversation should be about, as Professor Korte rightly pointed out.
Yeah, but he also pointed out that we made mistakes. Right?
And that mistake was not made today or made in the last 4, 5, or 8 years.
Oh, I see.
These are structural issues. You know, Prof talked about we exporting raw materials and not adding value. Absolutely. We becoming so import dependent. This didn't happen 7, 8 years ago. So these are the structural issues that as a country, successive government, or should I say from independence till now, we have to deal with.
Except you also mentioned excessive expenditure in the year 2020, and which he said was a mistake too.
Excessive expenditure in the year 2020, what triggered that? When people had to be fed from their homes, when government made no provisions in 2019 November, when you read the budget, there was absolutely no provision for related costs that government was going to wake up the next day and say, we are going to close our borders. There will be no inflows. There will be no importation coming, import duties coming in. Government wake up the next day, thousands of people have to be fed. Veronica Bucket, nose mask, vaccines. So 2020...
Oh, that's what we spend all the money on.
No, I'm not saying.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that.
No, please. You know, one thing I like is if you ask a question, don't try to, what's the word to say? You see, you always want to twist it, but please, whatever I say is exactly what I mean. So if you need clarity, ask me and I'll say it. The point I'm making is that the 2020 expenditure didn't happen by accident. And therefore, it's the result of unplanned expenditure. But this is not to say we couldn't have done better in the years to come. And therefore, making references and also reiterating the point Professor Korte made. One, we export stuff in their raw material, in their raw forms. Whereas we could do better by having industries, at least to have process. That one increases our export earnings. It ensures that we create more jobs for our people. We are not doing that as a country. And this didn't happen last year or the 7 years ago. Our tax revenue, we know, is very low. So when you have low tax revenue, what do? You end up borrowing to finance the fiscal gap that you create. the borrowing again will have its own repercussions, because the issue of repayment comes in, and that's why we go to the point where it becomes not feasible.
He says there should be a ceiling. Is that something you agree with?
I think there's
a legislated ceiling.
This is something
on debt levels.
This is something already being considered. There are proposals to amend our PFM, and part of it, whilst I don't want to preempt anything, just for you to see that we are doing something, and also to assure Ghanaians that the willingness of this team with our minister to get things right is there, and I'm sure you can see it glaring in the eyes. One of the first things is that we want to have a debt ceiling. Yes, we want to have a debt ceiling. So as part of fiscal rules, we want to have, in fact, minister even signaled in the mid-year budget to restore the 5% fiscal rule. Now, we also want to have a very strong fiscal council. And this is something the minister has already worked on, and I think is going to cabinet very soon. That we want an independent fiscal council, a council that will be able to bite, as Prof put it, a council that will be able to advise, but crucially, be able to shoulder all the workload. Because if you haven't just about 4 or 5 people, as we have now, as a fiscal advisory council, their role will be different than when you have an independent fiscal council, like we have the Congressional Budget Office.
I get you. So this independence will not be appointed by government?
I don't think I'm the one in charge of recruitment.
No, I'm asking, because you say you want an independent, and forgive me, but I've reviewed that structure.
Yeah.
One of our difficulties is that we end up having appointees there who are beholden to government, and so are not as critical as many would say, or may not have the powers to bite. So when you say we have an independent one, what level of independence are we going for?
I think that these are proposals yet to be decided.
Oh, it's not been fashioned out yet.
On cabinet, and therefore I won't be able to. But one thing I can assure you is that one is going to have a team of competent individuals, people that are able to stand with all pressures, and the key we are putting is their independence. And that their tenure of office wouldn't be based on a particular political party.
Governments. Oh, okay, that's
so that is where the independence will come in. But again, these are proposals. I can't go into detail, but at least I can share this on.
I am interested in it because I think that's the way forward. That's what people are actually discussing, and that's what Prof also mentioned. On the debt ceiling part, do you have a debt to GDP percentage in mind?
Not really, but you know, both IMF, World Bank usually predicts a sustainable debt to GDP of 55%, which is the direction we currently are working on. And in fact, from where we are with the DDEP, we had about 28% saved. We had the bilaterals giving us a percentage. We had the Eurobonds. And once we finish everything together with the commercials, we will definitely come to that 55% in no time. So the rate of debt accumulation reducing, it gives us a greater opportunity to actually achieve that and possibly maintain it, if at all not to reduce it. We are bent to do anything possible to make sure that we don't go above that 55. But in terms of the ceiling, again, I can't preempt with the content of the document, but the global best practice, acceptable practice, which the IMF and all the key financial institutions believe is sustainable, is the 55% debt to GDP.
Now, ISSER also proposed building up sinking fund to ensure sufficient repayment of restructured debt. Before the sinking fund idea comes in, what is our plan to actually repay these restructured debt?
I think the most important thing at this stage is having that relief, because I wonder how the situation will have been at this critical time, especially on providing critical infrastructure, if you were to make those repayments. So having 2.8 billion savings from bilaterals, 4.7 debt cancellation from Eurobond, and a 4.4 billion Eurobond debt servicing, that has given us a very good leeway, breathing space for us to be able to provide for critical infrastructure like education and hospitals and what have you. Now, the issue of the sinking fund was actually proposed in the minister's quarterly review. That the last two he did, he mentioned it throughout, that he believes that we don't want to be in that situation where we become debt distressed. You don't want to be at that situation where repayment now becomes a challenge again, and then we're going back in circle. We want to avoid this whole IMF circle. Like it's becoming like almost every 5 years we are back. And the best way to do that, now that we have the leeway, what can we do in the period that we don't have to service the loan? What can we do to build up buffers? So when we get to the point of repayment, as a government or as people, we are covered, and then we have some buffers that will take care of those repayments. So to me, the things that will take us not going to where we were before, apart from the sinking fund, is number one, doing things right. Borrowing at a sustainable rate. And to me, improving on revenue, tackling all leakages to make sure that the revenue that you project, the revenue that you receive, actually goes to the intended purposes. And there are lots of work ongoing.
In February 2023, Secretary, the former finance minister, said, abandoning sinking fund created, when he was finance minister, created the debt challenges that we have currently on our hands. Do you agree?
I can't comment on that.
I'm not sure what you mean by can't. I thought you were just praising the concept of sinking fund.
No, because the point is I haven't read his statement fully. So you can ask me a question without necessarily.
Oh, okay.
Because if you say...
Let's take out Secretary. Did we abandon sinking fund? Is that a cause of our debt challenge? And could it have been a very useful tool in our quest to deal with the debt problems that we had?
I'm not privy to the histories behind the sinking fund when it was at all abolished, cancelled. But one thing I know is that, the sinking fund has its purpose. And that's, if you look at what minister wants to do with this particular arrangements of putting in something and build buffers for the future, you cannot underestimate what the impact it will be. So it's something personally, apart from what the minister is saying, I will advocate for, so that in the future, we don't run into this difficulty. It's a brilliant fund that we should all see it as a responsibility, putting something in for the sake of future, that we don't run into all this again.
You mentioned key things, and you talked about taxation too, raising enough revenue. And of course, in the Republic of Ghana, it's either you are deepening the tax net or broadening the tax net, or a combination of both, or making that entire system efficient enough so that it doesn't add on to it. Exactly what's government strategy when it comes to revenue mobilization around taxes and all the other options available?
Right. No country develops without tax. So we cannot do away with the compensation of taxation. But what we need to do as a country is to make sure that we have a tax system that is inclusive, that is not punitive, and a system that ensures equity and transparency. Over the years, there have been a number of reforms ongoing at the GRA and the ministries to support GRA, for example. What we want to do going forward on revenue is to bring in the needed reforms to ensure that, one, investors are happy to come, businesses are happy to stay and reinvest, and that individuals are not overburdened. Most of times, because the people who pay the taxes are very low, so therefore it becomes very difficult. So you have, currently, we have about 7.4 million people, eligible taxpayers, but the active taxpayers are under 2 million, about 1.9 million. So how do we get 1.9 million taking on the burden of 31 million people?
And we're talking income tax?
Yes, income tax, direct taxes. So then it becomes very difficult. But what we are doing with GRA, and actually I am leading that with the Ghana Revenue Authority, is to reform the taxpayer database. We want to clean it to the point where the less active ones, we are able to track individuals and their businesses with the help of Ghana Card, with the help of digitization, with the help of the digital address systems, we're able to map up people's businesses, people's incomes, and therefore becomes easier with compliance. Again, as more people are caught in the net, it reduces the burden, because the few people you have, you're going to share the burden for them. But the more people, that's why you talk of spreading the net wide. The more you can spread, the wider you can spread the net, the lesser the burden on individuals becomes. And the target is that let's try to clean the data. Let's get an accurate data. Let's have a clear picture of people, their businesses, individuals, and their activities. So then when you intend to implement any policy, you have a data you're speaking to. You have people and their incomes, their businesses, their locations. Until we get this done, it's going to be the business as usual. And as I keep telling you, there are lots of work going on behind the scene at the ministry.
When are we hoping to get this done?
End of first quarter, 2025.
Sort out the database issues.
Yes. It's clean taxpayer data.
Really?
That the ministry and Ghana government will be happy to make a decision with. I can assure you.
End of first quarter 20.
So end of March 2025.
Next year is
next year.
2025.
Yes, next year.
That's a very positive development. And of course, because we've been talking about this for God knows how long. Now, under that, are we considering removing some tax handles?
Absolutely.
Once many have actually considered to be problematic.
Absolutely.
Like what?
In fact, the point is that apart from the administrative reforms of making sure that the compliance processes becomes easier for taxpayers, we are also looking at reviewing all the tax handles, all the tax policies. We are reviewing all the tax handles to make sure that, as I said, they are less punitive. We create an environment that is business-friendly from the tax front, and that FDI inflows will increase, and Ghana will gain its position as we used to be. A number of taxes will be assessed. We are going to look at which one of them have to be removed, which one will have to be modified, and which one have to be reintroduced. For example, we had the road tax as a road toll. Minister saying is coming back in 2025. So we are going to go through almost all the tax handles. So there's a good amount of work going, and I can promise you that the burden is going to be taken off as we're going to get more people into the tax net.
This rationalization process, are you now doing it or it's already been done?
We are doing it. It's the process. I mean, GR has been going through.
So do we know which ones you have intent to remove it? Because, for example, Dr. Bawumia has been saying that e-levy must go. Is it the view of the finance ministry that e-levy must go?
For now, what you're doing is to review the taxes. So once you do all the assessment, then we come to the point of which of them are we modifying, which of them are we continuing, which of them are we abolishing. So until the review completes, I won't be able to share specifics with you.
Now, another place where revenue is also a problem is at the ports. Of course, I mean, for mills, and even before that time, there's been complaints about efficiency and other issues. ISSER is proposing that you rotate the personnel who work at the ports and also get GRA staff to declare assets, and that if for nothing at all, nobody should stay there for more than 2 years. They believe that the more you rotate them, the issues around, if you like, rent seeking would be dealt with. Indeed, they also believe that the situation where people who work at GRA have companies doing the job that ought to be done by the port service itself should be abolished completely. Are these proposals you at the ministry consider prudent and willing to take on?
I think you should understand my position. I'm a deputy minister.
Yes, but you represent the ministry.
No, I'm a deputy minister.
I get your point.
Okay.
Has this come up?
I mean, ISSER report is, ISSER's report is less than 24 hours old. So how can it come up?
I'm asking whether you've been considering some of these things, because attempts to improve standards at the ports have been going on for God knows how long.
Oh, there are a number of factors. And of course, I'm the minister in charge of revenue in the ministry. So these are the recommendations. When I read them, I found them very useful. And there are recommendations I'll be sharing with the minister in our next engagement. But one thing I can say is that currently we have PM Ayorogo, who is the Commissioner for Customs. And I tell you, he just came in, but he's one commissioner I salute. One of the dedicated individuals I have met within the commission, apart from the Commissioner General herself also working head of. Since he came in, the revenue for quarter, I think the last quarter has been very good. And there are a number of measures he's putting in place in an attempt to reduce the leakages. Because it's a fact. We all know that the leakages at the port, or perceived leakages. But we need one commitment. We need that leadership. And I think we are getting that from PM Ayorogo, and also me being in charge of the port from the ministry. I am also working hand in hand and giving all the support. But yes, I think rotating staff in a sensitive environment isn't a bad thing. And whilst I said I am a deputy, and therefore whatever I say is not the main man taking the decision, I find most part of the report by ISSER very, very good. So I have noted few points, including the one they said you shouldn't be allowed to engage in companies in the port unless after 5 years. I mean, I love most of this, and I think there are things we should look into. And I mean, that's the beauty of having institute like ISSER. You know, the ministry, we are there. We are working for Ghana. But it's good if you work for Ghana with Ghanaians. And to have ISSER coming on board with this, I mean, the doors are open. Where I sit, last week I engaged the importers to see how I can make life comfortable for them.
Do you plan on reducing the port charges too? The taxes there?
I mean,
that's still part of the general review you talked about.
Yes, it's part of, but immediately the point is, what can we do for them? So one of the things that I've actually commissioned one of the directors, the Revenue Policy Division, for them to assess all the various charges at the port, for me to see where I can speak to the minister for possible consideration, to at least make the environment easier for our importers. Because when it becomes cheaper, it reflects on what happens in the market. So I can tell you there are lots of things that are ongoing.
And when are they likely to hear good news? That's the importers.
I've decided to meet them every quarter.
Okay.
So my promise to them is that the report will be ready by the next quarter on the decision that we can do immediately to support them.
Now, the minister has mentioned something that in the course of our conversation came up. Funding major road projects has become a problem. In fact, government is going to dedicate more money to that process, as we understand is going to happen. Recently, we launched a DRIP, the DRIP. I mean, ideally, I would have wanted to know from you the cost of these things, the ones that they have used an RTI to make requests for, whether you have the information, the cost of the machines, the cost of the repair of roadworks and all of that. But the substantive question I'm asking is, the quest to do infrastructure development with pension funds has been raised. Explain that to me. Where is that coming from?
I'm not aware of that.
Oh, the minister said it.
Well, the minister said, I'm not aware.
Oh, you're not aware of it? Oh, okay. So you cannot explain to me what is the rationale behind that?
No, because generally I'm not aware.
Okay, now I get your point.
When did the minister say that?
No, the idea is that we should be exploring ways of improving infrastructure.
Absolutely.
From local resources, and pension funds are an alternative, for example. Because, of course, if you take my money for the next 20 or so years, I'll still be working. So you pay me back maybe sometime in the future, right? So that's an alternative for some of these projects.
Right.
You don't think that's a good idea?
I think for me to comment on issues like this, especially sitting where I'm sitting and the sensitivity
if you are not a
people's
deputy minister
investment.
and you are just a teacher.
I'm a deputy minister.
Okay, yes, I get your point. But I wanted to know whether you could explain that to me.
No, but I'm a deputy minister.
All right, I get you.
But the point I'm making is that I think it's good for us to explore ways to improve our infrastructure. Ghana has a huge infrastructure deficit. And here I really commend the President for this bold initiative of those DRIP, the DRIP project. That's the District Road Improvement Program.
Yeah.
I think this is a wonderful idea. I mean, you being maybe in Accra, you might not experience what may come in from Sefi Benchema, for example, what I experience. Because a chunk of our roads are not tarred and at times become unmotorable. For people to even get the foodstuffs to come to the market and subsequently to Accra and Kumasi and the bigger cities, it's a challenge. And I am a witness to it. Actually, this weekend, I was at my constituency.
I agree with you perfectly.
So to me, it's a brilliant idea. Therefore, exploring ways to enhance road infrastructure, one, has a tendency to increase our food production. Currently, food inflation has been one of our biggest challenges.
That's true.
And how do we address that? It has to be a deliberate effort. And if government alone cannot do it, then it's better for government to look at the private sector outside. What other options do we have in making sure that we improve our road infrastructure? So any feasible alternative to me should be considered, because we cannot wait. You cannot wait whilst food prices are skyrocketing when the foods are in the forest and they're not getting their ways here. So I haven't heard of the fund you're talking about and the proposal to use them. What I have heard the minister advocating for is that PPP is the way forward.
Okay.
That Ghana, it's time that the ministry wants to open its doors to redefine government's relationship with the private sector on infrastructure. And our Public Investment and Asset Division of the ministry, PIAD, is going to be repurposed for us to be more friendlier and open our doors for the private sector for more collaborative engagement on our infrastructure in Ghana.
When are we going to get the CD, what they call it, the CD exchanging to a dollar at 6 CD, like we had a couple of years ago?
You know, fiscal policies and monetary policies, when you implement them, do take time. So I can't sit here and say in the next minute, in the next hour, it's going to happen. But again, looking at the 54% we were and where we are heading towards, I am confident that the CD will be contained. At least there's a stability. Of course, that up to June, 18.9% depreciation of the CD against the dollar is still high. Mm-hmm. And I believe businesses, they do feel the impact of this. But I am confident on the direction. One, as we work towards disinflation, witnessing disinflation, I can definitely see the CD also stabilizing. I can't give you a specific time, but one thing I can show you is that we are not far away from seeing the figures that we had pre-COVID.
Reducing expenditure. How much, quantum-wise, have we reduced government expenditure by in this first quarter, in this first half?
I can't be specific on the figure, but it's more than 20 billion.
20 billion?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking about money we didn't get, so we couldn't spend. I'm talking about money we deliberately made the decision not to spend because
in the last mid-year review,
yes,
Minister didn't ask for supplementary budget.
Yeah.
And we revised our expenditure downwards. Mm-hmm. I like to say that when I finish, I'm more than happy to send you a copy of those mid-year budgets so you can see the figures yourself. But we have cut expenditure.
Which areas are we looking at here specifically? Name the areas where the major cuts have affected.
One I know is that's coming from the reservicing. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have to ask more because we chose, because of the positive outcomes from our engagement with the external creditors and the DDEP, government was able to save the debt servicing obligations. And therefore, I think it was wise for government not to spend that money. Okay. So when we cut the expenditure, we are not spending on the servicing point. 10
seconds. Do you agree with the proposal by the NHIS that all of their money should be given to them? There should not be any middle ground of a consolidated fund so that they'll get a part of it instead of getting all the monies from the NHIL?
I haven't seen the proposal. Send a copy and I'll get your results.
The Deputy Minister in the ministry responsible for finance is Alex Apabin. We should do this more often.
I would love to.
Many thanks to you, Honorable Minister. Many thanks to you, Professor Peter Kortey, for joining us. I understand our time is up, but I appreciate you also out there for joining us today's edition on the economy of the Republic of Ghana with the Deputy Minister and Professor Peter Kortey.